Okay, our first question is from Cora, and it's, how do you overcome the fear of entrepreneurial failure?
That's a great
Yeah.
question. There, I've started 7 businesses over the course of my life. More than that if you count the ones we've incubated through our ecommerce accelerator. And well, 3 of them, I guess you'd say, were successful. 4th is engine. Hopefully that'll be the 4th successful one here. But it's never be afraid to fail. I mean, it's normal for these things to fail. And I was moderating an event a few years ago, and there's some Wall Street bigwigs there, and I was the moderator, and so I asked them how they dealt with failure in the big banks, and then they posed the question back to me: how do you deal with failure in the entrepreneurs you either backed or companies you've started or whatever? So, well, if you write an entrepreneur a check, a seed fund, let's say, and you give him $100,000 or $50,000 or $250,000, and his company fails, so how do you deal with that? So, well, I want to fund his next company because there was something smart about the guy for me to fund him in the first place. And if he fails, he's learned a lot from it. So you've got to learn something from it and not be afraid of the failure. Now, that's not an excuse to go, oh, I'll give up. I just failed. It's normal. But you shouldn't be afraid of it as you dive in because it's normal to fail. And in fact, in my last venture, here we are, we're 5 years in, we've raised $100 million of venture capital, and the thing started going sideways. It was not the best outcome from a company that raised $100 million of capital. But, what did you learn from it, and how did you build something great there? And that's what we did. That's a tough one. You just can't even think about it. You got to know it's normal for failure and act like it's not there, I guess, is the best answer to that.
Yeah, and I think coming from an experience, it's a really unique point of view coming from yourself because looking at the failure, I love that you want to invest in his next company. Something that's really interesting from people who are joining an entrepreneurial venture, joining a startup, things of that nature, you got to realize that you're joining a company that even if that company does nothing but introduce you to the top people in your industry, the top people in your space, it's how you frame the thought of failure, because ultimately it's going to lead you to the next best thing that you could ever create. I mean, yeah. Slack is an amazing example that comes to mind. Slack as a company failed in their first venture, which then led
Weren't they
to
like
Slack.
some huge multiplayer universe game?
Yeah, like a
yeah,
game dev studio.
Yeah, game dev. Okay, and that failed, and here's Slack, obviously.
Communication.
Not the most logical transition.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like the communication platform, they were building that internally for their oan team to use as they built that game, and then there was some core of that, I think, in the game, and they reported.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, if you look at even seed-funded companies, and those are the best of the best, right? I mean, if you're a startup and you know how hard it is to get seed capital, only the best ones typically get seed capital. Well, 28% of those, which is a very low number, go on to raise a Series A. So that means that 72%, if my math's right, failed. Well, same thing on the Series A to Series B. There's only 36-ish% that move on from Series A to Series B. So these are the best companies around, and you get, 1 in 10 of them go from seed all the way up to Series B. So yeah, fear of failure happens at all levels,
Right.
even Silicon Valley-backed, VC-backed companies.
Mm.